Hi, I'm Jeff, the SP Spaz, and I'm continuing my series of answering viewer mail that I've gotten in my YouTube inbox. And so, once again, if you have sent me a message, stay tuned because I might just answer yours. Um, and if you haven't, feel free to do so about anything that I talk about in this or any other video. Um, even if it's to tell me I stink and I should stop doing videos. I appreciate the feedback, whatever it may be. Now I won't listen to you if you tell me that, but I still appreciate getting it, because it's feedback and I live off feedback. I thrive off it. So, um, yes, being slapped in the face is better than being ignored. I know to some of you that's like a really strange concept, but to the other SPs, they know what I'm talking about. All right, and that leads me right into our next question, because this is kind of one of those serious topics, but I still, will find ways to make it lighthearted because that's what I do. Um, but it's a long letter, but I want to read the whole thing because it was well written and very interesting in the things that she said. Yeah, it does seem to be most of my messages have come from females. When I did and I'll talk about this in another video too, the analytics, that shows you who's viewing, um, my audience is like 67% female, so no complaints here, ladies. All right. Um, this question, or this letter, begins, Hello, the SP Spaz. I have enjoyed some of your videos and salute your endeavor to create a voice for the SP community. I know you made a reference to the NF Geeks channel and how they've sort of built that community and how they may have inspired you to start up your channel, so I think that is wonderful. I'm writing you because I'm sort of on a quest to understand my father a bit more. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was younger, and I'm only able to go off my memories of him. Otherwise, if he were still alive, I could just talk to him. I am an INFJ. Probably should have guessed that before she even said that. But anyway, I actually came across your channel after watching Pneumoceptor's videos and saw your conversations with her. Great videos, by the way. Thanks. Well, anyway, if I had to guess at what my father's type was, I would guess it was some type of SFP, but my best guess is still very uncertain. I think with people who are or were very close to you, like family members, it sometimes gets very difficult to type them. Plus, I had the added confusion of having a father who was deeply depressed. I think something like that sort of muddies the waters somewhat. This brings me to my question. How do you think depression would affect an SFP? What do you think that would look like, or how would that manifest? I realize this message is getting quite long, and that question is kind of complicated to answer, especially with so little information to go off from. The reason I suspect my father might have been an SFP was because his sister told me that before his divorce, the event that most likely was the catalyst for his depression, he was a very happy-go-lucky guy, a social butterfly who was beloved by almost everyone he got involved with, and very personable. That was the part of him that I unfortunately was not able to get to know because the divorce happened when I was very young. I did, however, remember that he was not a very conventional person. He didn't really conform to the status quo. I believe my aunt is some type of SJ, and she and he used to butt heads all the time about what he should be doing. From what I've heard, he's always been kind of unconventional even before his divorce. It seems that before his depression he behaved like an extrovert, but during his depression he was very introverted. Anyway, I was curious about what an SFP's perspective on this would be and thought I would reach out to one. I hope this was not too forward or strange that I asked. Thanks for your vids and please keep them coming. Okay, once again, thank you very much for the interesting and heartfelt letter. I appreciate it and appreciate you, trusting me with an answer. Um, and this is a topic I've discussed many times before in many different ways, and in a lot of the conversations, not necessarily relating it to type theory, because obviously just the word depression uh, is one of those kind of buzzwords that has brings forth a whole lot of responses depending on how it's said, the context, and there's different layers and degrees and things that factor into it. Whether it's a diagnosis of clinical depression or just somebody saying, well, I felt kind of down in the dumps today, and then the next day I was over it. There's obviously a whole lot of variation when it comes to that topic. And I have very strong feelings when it comes to the way that some people respond to feelings of depression or other people's depressions. But I want to try to avoid getting as much into that as I could, because it's a whole other topic within itself, really, that I could go on for a long time about. But I want to focus on what her actual question was when it comes to SFP specifically, or in terms of depression. Um, and really, I think a lot of this applies to STPs as well. So I'm going to kind of start a little bit more general and then get a little more specific to me. Because as I've said in previous videos, and plenty of other things, show this, that SPs thrive on, experiences, sensation-seeking personality. We are very action-based. So our lives are based on whatever actions and activities that we are into in this moment, that we sink ourselves into that and do the absolute best we can at whatever that is, and then when we're tired of that, we move on to something else. Um, so to me, the real way to put SP depression is boredom, and that's me just saying that again throws up the flag with some people who are like, oh, wait a minute, boredom and depression aren't the same thing, Jeff. Don't try to confuse people. I'm not trying to confuse people, and I don't think I have this wrong with SP people. Over and over again, I have had this expressed to me that boredom um, becomes depression when it's extended for a long period of time. It's one thing to have a few minutes that you're bored, or even a day, or a few days, but it's another thing for it to be an extended period of non-interest in anything, and that to me really does become a form of depression. And to me, it seems the most common when it comes to SP people. Now, it may not be the only one. There's obviously uh, feelings of that come from other directions, such as insecurity or lack of confidence, and that's another thing that I'll kind of get to, is that boredom is a big source of it, but then there's also it on top of that is the lack of self-confidence, which of course leads, kind of does that triangle of self-respect and self-esteem. All that goes down when you don't have those things reinforcing each other. Then you end up with the lack of those things reinforcing each other, which is kind of a form of depression. So, I have seen SPs when they are in this kind of funk, whatever you want to call it, this depression, and sometimes it doesn't last very long, but there is a period of time, like between really being into a certain activity or thing, where there's sort of a shift that takes place. And what I have noticed from non-SPs is when they experience one of us during one of those shifts, there's often kind of someone expressing, you seem different. You don't sound like yourself. You seem, and people will worry about that and be like, is this person suicidal, or are they crying for help? I mean, what's the issue here? Most of the time, I think it's a healthy thing. It's just something that takes place, and during it, there's really not anything you can do but just sort of, continue to live your life and hope that it doesn't last very long. And it's only when it really does last for long periods of time that it really kind of enters that, you know, lasting depression territory. And sorry, when I talk about depression, my mouth gets dry. At no other time. But what I talked about as far as the lack of self-confidence and all that, even that in a way sort of stems from boredom, but it's kind of an offshoot of that. It starts with kind of a lack of self-confidence in the areas that SPs really try to be confident in, which is being proficient at exciting actions. And if you feel insecure about that and say, I don't feel like I'm good at impressing somebody with my actions, then you can start to feel really let down and insecure about that, and in which case everything else sort of starts to topple down on top of it. And I think with STPs, that may very often be more about their proficiency with certain mechanical type things, and I don't mean just like mechanical tools, but anything like as kids, making jumps on a dirt bike or skateboarding or any of these other kind of things, just or general like or team sports, things like that. Um, STPs put a lot of self confidence in their ability to do those sort of things. A lot of action oriented activities um, that are very physical, and if they don't feel proficient at any of those, then that definitely leads to lack of self-esteem and kind of a depression type feeling. With SFPs, it's not that we don't experience that also, um, but there's sort of a component beyond that where we're not just trying to be proficient at a certain action, we're trying to make an actual like profound impact upon another human being. People's responses to us are very important, um, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a huge, overwhelming response. We're not always looking for like standing ovations and things like that. Those are nice, but it doesn't even have to be that. It can be as simple as someone just saying, "Hey, your joke was funny," or your performance at violin was good. Whatever it is that somebody is doing. You compliment their performance, and that is a huge thing for our self-esteem. Um, so and I'm kind of focusing on young people because I think that's sort of where all that stuff sort of gestates. And when you become an adult, um, a lot of your experience as a child and growing up can factor into how self-confident you are as an adult, and it can take a long time to kind of get over that. So obviously, to the woman who wrote the message to me, I don't know her father. I can't speculate as to all of the details of his life or the things that he may or may not have done. Um, but I can say that from my own personal experience, there were two main times in my life where I went through that shift for long enough that I really would call it a depression. And the first time it happened was when I was 12 years old, and so it was smack dab in the middle of puberty, which was probably a big factor in that. Is that as I went through those kind of hormonal and physical changes, in a sense, I couldn't handle it, and it put me in a position of uncomfortable examination of myself. And I talked about that a little bit in my video about emotions. That NFs kind of naturally from the beginning consider and contemplate their own emotions. SFPs feel the emotions right from the beginning, but don't spend a whole lot of time examining them, I believe, most of the time. So when you hit kind of an area of your life like going through puberty and stuff like that, it can kind of force you to confront those things out of nowhere. It can seem like it sort of comes out. And for me, um, it came in an overwhelming feeling that absolutely nobody really cared about me. My feeling was that if I died tomorrow, the amount of people that would notice would be very small, and those people really wouldn't care that much. And, I thought this about even my own mother, who has shown many times in my life since then how much she really cares about me. And it's not just, telling me I love you when she calls me, because she does that too, but she has shown me her love much more even than she said it. Um, and yet at that time, I couldn't see that. I couldn't see any love from anybody, no matter who it was. It wasn't going to bust through my overwhelming feeling of if anybody has said they cared about me, it's a lie. They said it because they wanted me to respond in a certain way, take a certain action, conform to a certain stereotype, not stereotype, but a standard, I guess is what I meant to say. Um, it was a manipulation tactic, not true belief. It wasn't real love or caring for me. And that was the feeling I had. And the second time it happened, I was actually in my early 20s. In fact, I think I might have been exactly 20. Um, and that was sort of the post school depression, you might say. I dropped out of college and quit my job, and wasn't doing anything. Obviously, I was still doing things, but I went through a period where I had no interest in anything. I sort of have this feeling like I'm not talented, I'm not good at anything, I couldn't make it through school, uh, work is too hard, I can't do any jobs, I have no marketable skills, I'm just basically a useless person, so I might as well just kind of vegetate until I die. It was kind of and it wasn't even that I was, when it happened when I was 12, I could literally have been called suicidal, and I did in fact try to kill myself once. When it happened when I was 20, it was almost worse to me because I wasn't suicidal. I didn't want to kill myself because in order for me to want to kill myself, I would have had to care more than I did. I literally cared about nothing for a period of time. And thinking about that now, it's extremely scary. At the time I was in it, it went sort of beyond that. I couldn't be scared by it either because it was just so like empty, you know. Um, both times that occurred, I found something that got me out of it. Now, both times, my mother or my parents sent me to like a therapist, but the therapist didn't really get me out of it. That didn't really help me much. Now, I can't say that there was absolutely no help. It's possible that somehow something that I said in, one of those encounters did in some way aid me, but in general, it really didn't. Um, it was other things that I found that got me out of it. And I have over and over again heard from other SP type people that when they have felt those feelings, when they have had these kind of extended periods of boredom or insecurity or, lack of self-esteem and lack of interest in things, that there has been some activity or some movement or something that they just latched themselves onto as sort of like a lifeline, like a life preserver that pulled them out of it because they sunk themselves 100% into whatever that was, and that was what was able to pull them in, out of that and into, a life where they cared about something again. And that in turn led to, more interest in other things and more acknowledgement of the caring of other people, but it took some time. And the first step that had to take place was finding that thing. And like I said, with SPs, it's about action. With other types, it might be, with NTs, it might be like a project that they find. With SJs, it might be, a familial tie or something that, something that applies to their status in society. And within Fs, it may be, a personal connection with someone or something like that. With SPs, it tends to be an activity, and of course with SFPs, it usually is an activity that somehow involves people, but not always directly. And both times it really happened to me. It wasn't necessarily something that actually connected me to people that much at all at first. It was almost the opposite. It was almost sort of getting away from everything in my real life that was a problem and finding something that was sort of an escape. When I was 12, it actually ended up being the radio, which is something I'd had an interest in a long time anyway. But I discovered basically radio countdown shows, where they do the top 40 and start with 40 and go to number one. And it wasn't just that they counted down the music. They told stories. They had dedications. There was a real like kind of presentation to it, where it was more than just kind of a thing to fill time on the radio. It seemed important. It was something that I could write down the songs, and I could make up my own charts. It led me to have desire to perform actions related to it. It was like a new world for me, in that this where I could turn on the radio and listen to Dick Clark or Casey Kasem or Shadow Stevens, and it was like they were my real family. NF Geeks did a video about like your true family versus your blood family or something like that, and in a way it sort of seemed like that. It was my real family was on the radio. They were the ones that were having fun playing the music and talking about the artists and reading dedications and doing all these things that to some people would just be like, oh, well, that's just something on the radio, whatever. But to me, it was like a lifeline for finding something that I really could feel like I could absorb myself into and have not only a little bit of fun with, but feel like I really belong to something. Um, so I felt that way about countdown shows. And then when I was 20, it ended up being roads, highways. Most of my life I'd had sort of a fascination with roads. Um, and when I was a kid, they had this thing called Safety City where the kids got to go and actually sort of drive these electric cars around these little tracks in this thing that was designed to look like a city. Um, and Anyway, that was a lot of fun, and I yearned for more time doing that, of course. So I loved it when I finally got a chance to really drive. But when I was a kid, I had done things like look at maps and imagine different routes to different places and things like that. And so when I finally got a chance to really drive them and get out on the highway and just go where I wanted to go, I mean, it was amazing. And when I really got to the point where I got a chance to really do that for real a lot, um, it basically saved me at age 20 because I had something that I could look forward to, something that no matter what else was going on during a week, um, I could get out there and drive. And actually, when I did that, I got a job again because I'm like, I need gas money. There started to be those things, those little things that you're like, well, they pull you back into life because there's practical necessities. You grab the lifeline of something to appeal to you, but then that creates realities you have to deal with, and in order to do that, you have to accept those realities and take actions you know, to deal with them, and that gets you back to more of a normal life. And in both of those scenarios, that happened. The countdown show thing made me focus on maybe once a week or a few times on the weekend, but it got me through other stuff because I was able to have that thing that I sort of look forward to, that I didn't just look at it as, well, at the end of the school day, it's just one more day of garbage and then go home and there's nothing to look forward to. It's just another day of, the same stuff until I go to sleep and wake up and do it all over again tomorrow. I had something instead that inspired me and kept me going in other ways. And so in both cases where I had what would be considered depression, that was what got me out of it, was finding that activity that I could grab onto. So I hope that answered your question about depression. Again, obviously it brought up a whole lot of different topics within that. So if the original asker of the question or anyone else has more questions, wants to know anything more specific about that, I realize this video is a little bit longer than the typical one, and even for my stuff, but I really didn't want to stop while I was on a roll with this particular subject because a lot of this stuff means a lot to me. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful, and if you have further questions or want to get me more specific about any particular thing, again, let me know any of the ways that I can be contacted through the YouTube inbox or in comments or video responses, or I'm on forums. I'm on Personality Cafe. I'm Fat Bozo, and on Typology Central, I'm Jeffster. Most forums, I'm usually Jeffster, but I've branched out on a few of them with a little bit more goofy names. But anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for watching.